So I know what you're thinking. God, won't someone talk about Season 8 of Game of Thrones? Well, if you insist. After all, I ain't no fucking kneeler. So we all know Season 8 was a travesty, so I don't want to just review it, but run it through some script doctoring. And I shall do this basically character by character, since the characters are what I think they messed up the most. But first let me complain from a wider view. Whether from laziness or from being in a hurry to go make their Star Wars show, I think D&D fell into a trap of making the show too self-aware. In the first half of the show, one of the most standout elements was the shocking character deaths. The death of Ned Stark sent us all reeling because my man genuinely seemed like the main character. So when he died, we all learned not to get too comfortable with anyone because no one is safe if this guy can die. And if you weren't quite sure of this, then the Red Wedding killed off any doubts. Game of Thrones was the show that was going to subvert your expectations on a regular basis, and the people loved it. But the subversion thing just can't last forever. You see, it works great in the rising action of the show, but once we get down to the last few seasons, we don't need more questions. We need answers. Loose ends need to get tied up, and after 8 seasons, there's going to be a few loose ends that the audience ties up ahead of time. There's just too many clues throughout the show. D&D, wanting to keep the subversion theme rocking along until the very last minute, decided to go in a nonsense direction with all of our main cast.
Well, Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces. They certainly haven't forgotten about her.
And the Golden Company has arrived in King's Landing, courtesy of the Greyjoy fleet. The balance has grown distressingly even.
Our lovely and expertly crafted characters created by a real genius, Mr. Martin, and they deserved better. So let's start off with Jon Snow. Part of why it didn't break the story to kill Eddard Stark is because he wasn't really the main character in the first place. The main character was hidden away in a training camp at the Wall to protect the world from
Grumpkins and Snocks and all the other monsters your wetness warned you about.
nothing as far as Tyrion was concerned. So Jon seemed like a side character while the real main characters fought over the Iron Throne. The show is called Game of Thrones after all, but that's the trick. The Game of Thrones was a red herring. If you recall the first thing we see in the show, it's 2 guards being attacked by none other than White Walkers. Our introduction to Ned is through the plot point that he has to execute the deserter who survived the attack. So the story was never ultimately about the throne.
This isn't about noble houses. This is about the living and the dead.
Jon, Sam, and the boys were on the true mission of finding out the goal of the White Walkers and how to defeat them before they could breach the wall and end the world. Jon's story has by far the highest stakes over everyone else's. Jon himself gets to see the Night King multiple times and live to tell the tale. If the ultimate hero was Jon, then the ultimate villain was the Night King, the bringer of eternal darkness. The two finally face off and... What the fuck? Arya steals Jon's kill while he gets relegated to screaming at a dragon. I think D&D knew everyone assumed Jon and the Night King would fight it out, so they subverted our expectations by having Arya kill him instead. Here's the problem. We're way past that point in the story, and the only thing left to do with the Night King is have him killed by Jon. The whole story of the Night King is a story about him and Jon, so having anyone other than Jon kill him is utter bullshit. What was the point of Jon being the Azor Ahai and being the one who would stop the Night King if that just kind of ended up not being anything? This took place in episode 3, titled The Long Night. Here's what I would have done differently. Rather than having Theo defend Bran while he sits with both of his thumbs directly up his own butt, I would have had Bran use some of that three-eyed raven goodness to undo the Night King. You see, when he was looking into the past, he once saw how the Night King was made. He was tied to a weirwood tree and stabbed in the chest with an obsidian blade during some kind of ritual. Well, since Bran is literally sitting around weirwood trees, I would have had Bran come up with the idea and actually be useful somehow during maybe, I don't know, one of their many strategy meetings, and come up with some kind of banishment ritual. Sam could have found some scrolls at the Citadel that teach them how to do it, rather than kind of nothing happening at the Citadel. So Theon now has to protect Bran while he's performing this unsummoning ritual, and the Night King is on his way to stop it. Now something's actually happening. Theon can still die protecting Bran, but when Jon shows up, the showdown is between them. I'd have Arya still show up and maybe spear the Night King to the tree, letting Jon finish him off just as Bran completes the ritual. The Starks have done it again, and nobody's kills get stolen. And now, rather than sheer extreme convenience, the White Walkers all die because the ritual undid the ancient magic. The curse is broken. Also, this doesn't happen in episode 3. Having it happen so early in the season tells us that no, the Night King isn't the ultimate villain, the drunk pregnant woman with the pirate boyfriend is the real villain of the story. Also, what the hell were the backup White Walkers doing? They just stroll around like an entourage checking their instas while our heroes are fighting random zombies. This would have been an awesome chance to have Brienne and Jaime take on some real White Walkers and be badasses for a bit. Well, let's get back to Arya. I also hate that she just got told to give up the vengeance and takes off no problem, not to be useful to the plot for the rest of the show.
I'm gonna know a killer when I see one.
You don't f***ing say. The woman just killed a whole city. You think? I would have Arya absolutely kill Cersei. She watched her father get beheaded as a little girl, and the only person left to execute for it is in the same castle as her now. Arya spent most of the latter seasons training to be a killer, so let her kill someone who is literally on her kill list. Nearly no one else has as much stake to kill her as her. I'll get more into that later. But just like Jon getting his kill stolen, Arya gets hers stolen by some bricks, all for the sake of not being predictable. But when should Arya kill Cersei? I'd say after Cersei separates from the mountain, here, which brings me to the Hound. I would have the Hound give his revenge speech to Arya for it to fall on deaf ears, except for his own. He decides he doesn't want to kill his brother anymore, and he's going to try to start a new life, perhaps with some other hippies. But he can't just leave all these people to die at Daenerys' hand, so he decides to go ring the surrender bell that we all remember being talked about by Tyrion during the strategy meeting. So rather than ascending up a random staircase, he's going up a staircase that will lead him to the bell, only to run into his brother and Cersei. Cersei leaves the two to it, and later meets her demise at the hands of Arya. As soon as the Hound decides he doesn't want vengeance anymore, is exactly the moment that he now does have to fight his brother. See, this way we have a nice ticking clock element, where he needs to not only kill the mountain, but do it quickly enough to reach the bell before it's too late. He still wins, but without dying instantly, he's just mortally wounded. And with his dying breaths, he crawls up the stairs and reaches the bell just in time. But of course Daenerys ignores the bell and attacks anyway. So the Hound dies of his wounds having failed, and Arya gets that escape scene still, but now having actually accomplished something before taking off. Unfortunately, that leaves us with Daenerys still ignoring the bell, which seemed pretty out of character. So let's just fix that. I would have Daenerys start going crazy much earlier. I love the ultimate idea and plan of her becoming the Mad Queen, but she doesn't do enough in the show to make one think that she's that unhinged. Before the last couple episodes, she doesn't do anything more heinous than Jon and Ned killing young boys. Two characters we're told were absolutely, truly good guys.
I would say she's acting like the Mad King because it's rational. She's giving them a choice and they choose not to bend the knee to her, and she accepts that choice and she does exactly what she told them she would do. You know, from her standpoint, she's not acting insane in any way. She's just being tough, which is what she needs to be to win.
So I just would have had her rule be more complicated in Meereen. I would have had her failed attempts at benevolence lead her down a darker and more draconian path. So when this happens, it would be a callback to things we saw earlier in Meereen. Speaking of Meereen, someone else could have used some fixes there as well. And his name is Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion at one point was the reason I watched the show. And it makes sense knowing some of my favorite shows are House of Cards and Peaky Blinders. What Tyrion, Frank, and Tommy all have in common is that they are smarter than their adversaries but less powerful, so they have to use cunning and guile and sometimes ruthlessness to outplay their opponents in a deadly game of chess. But all of these characters seem to fall apart once they equal or outpower their opponents. Their way of working within the world fundamentally changes, so the obvious choice many writers take is to just start having the characters be an idiot and make awful decisions, to artificially create some kind of conflict. And if they keep that up, then eventually you lose what we love about the character in the first place. I think Tyrion lost his spice when he goes to Meereen and becomes the Hand of the Queen. Now he's the smartest man in the room and powerful to boot, so they had to start writing him to be a fool, and he consistently gets himself and others into trouble from this point on with his naivete.
Either you knew Cersei was lying and let me believe otherwise, or you didn't know at all, which makes you either a traitor or a fool.
I was a fool.
Not for the first time.
Somehow the man who spent all that time sparring with Cersei in King's Landing completely forgets what a tool she is, and now that he's working with the opposition who seeks to destroy her, he thinks that, oh no, she's a good person at heart, I have to go and, appeal to her. Tyrion really just needed to die after Oberyn failed to best the mountain. It could have been a poetic look at how much revenge actually cost, and it was the last time Tyrion did something really plot important. I wouldn't mind Tywin being killed by a Tyrell assassin, or a damn heart attack if it saved the sanctity of Tyrion's character. He would have died my favorite character. In fact, I can nearly say all the same things about Littlefinger. Peter Baelish was a near three-way tie of favorite characters for me with Tyrion and Ramsay. Baelish was just too smart to get outwitted by Sansa, who has never been anything but a punching bag the entire show.
Sansa thinks she's smarter than everyone.
She's the smartest person I've ever met.
That was a lie.
I'm not against Sansa outsmarting him if the show had done much more work showcasing that she had actually grown to become a good strategist over the last couple of seasons. Maybe she could have gotten on Ramsay's good side and spent time with him in the hall during tactical meets and picked up some wisdom, showed that she was a real survivor and an opportunist and had, picked up some of that cunning and guile from her time that she spent with Baelish. But instead, she's just a never-ending victim until the show decides that she's suddenly a badass. I even would have taken Arya just plain killing Baelish without permission. But having him crying and begging for his life, being completely outwitted by two little girls, it's just a damn disservice to one of the better characters on the show. And since we're back on Arya, you may be thinking, if Arya kills Cersei, then what do we do with Jaime? You may not be thinking that, but people who read the book may be thinking that. Well, Jaime is one of the only characters who actually finishes his arc, but then he just keeps going to ruin it. I had always wanted Jaime to kill Cersei because in the books, Maggie the Frog gives Cersei one more prophecy than in the show, which would lead one to think that Jaime is the doer-inner of Cersei. But since the show cut that prophecy, I don't really mind him not killing her as much. Jaime's story is really one of just not judging a book by its cover.
How many lives have you saved?
500,000. The population of King's Landing.
Jaime sacrificed his honor to save the people of King's Landing from a tyrant, and Ned, who we're to believe was a perfect man, judged Jaime unfairly and helped harden his heart against ever trying to even regain that honor. We learn all of this in the bathhouse with Brienne, way back in season 3.
Ned Stark wanted to hear my side. He judged me guilty the moment he set eyes on me.
This is why Jaime's character had a great finishing arc when he knights Brienne, thus finishing her story also. And choosing to live happily with her rather than going back to Cersei just to be murdered by bricks would have been a substantially better ending for him. But doesn't Jaime explain why he went back?
And for every one of the million people in that city, innocent or otherwise.
To be honest, I never really cared much for them. Innocent or otherwise.
Bullshit, Jaime. Everything about your character is that you sacrificed everything to save the people. You are a true blue hero, and that's why we rejoice when Brienne writes of your deeds in the Night Book, rather than say, ew, but he's a bad guy, why are you writing about him? It's like D&D didn't even watch their own show. Now, I ain't done capping on Bran. The writers had no idea what to do with him, so he literally just fucks off for a season. When he comes back, they still have no clue what to do with him, so he just sits around and tells people the least important info he can think of.
I can never be Lord of Winterfell. I can never be Lord of anything, and the Three-Eyed Raven.
But King? Well...
Why do you think I came all this way?
Also, as king, can't he just pardon Jon once the Unsullied leave for the Isle of Noth? Also, why did the Unsullied not execute Jon on the spot for killing Daenerys? Didn't Jon get into it with Grey Worm like a minute earlier as he was war-criming dudes in the street? Why did he change his mind all of a sudden for Jon? And why did Drogon burn the throne? Are you telling me that this dragon, who has shown the intelligence of a horse so far, now waxes poetic and kills the symbol of his master's defeat? What the hell? I would have either had Jon get caught first by Grey Worm and the Unsullied and fight it out mano a mano with Grey Worm, possibly even invoking trial by combat. Or I would have had Jon hop on Drogon, who can only decipher murder after the fact as well as a horse can, and kill the Unsullied with his new dragon, then take his rightful place as king, 6 of his name, king of the Andals and the First Men, lord of the 7 kingdoms, protector of the realm, and father of motherfucking dragons. Deuces. So 3 years ago, I saw the trailer for the New Mutants, and aside from the hacky remake of The Wall, I thought it looked interesting enough to make me, a guy who disliked the